Hey top performers, welcome to this training video. So we're going to be learning about habits and behavioral design today. This includes how to install healthy habits and also really importantly, how to remove any destructive habits or kryptonite habits. The actions you do on a consistent basis have a huge impact on your overall performance. In James Clear's book Atomic Habits, he did the maths on what tiny improvements, like the overall impact on tiny improvements. And he showed that if you get 1% better each day, at the end of 1 year, you'll be 37 times better. So don't be put off by something seemingly small and insignificant. If you're consistent and do things time and time again, you can get really huge results over, not even a particularly long time span. So just to introduce myself quickly, my name's Ed Mowbray. I'm a certified human potential coach and a certified heroic performance coach. So my job really is to help people get the best out of themselves. My mission is to help humanity flourish. I do this one person at a time and help people realize their potential. How did I end up here? I've always been fascinated by performance and human potential. This stems from my love as a rock climber, really, as an athlete. I was a member of the junior GB climbing team and also a British bouldering champion as a junior. So, I have a real love of trying to get the most out of myself, how to perform the absolute best I can. And it's a really easy space for me to hang out in. I absolutely love this stuff. And I've carved out a career in sort of performance coaching because I just love operating in this space. Anyway, that's enough about me. Let's dive in. So the content of this training video today is derived from the top 3 books in the space. So we've got Atomic Habits by James Clear, Tiny Habits by Fogg, and Mini Habits by Guise. If you want to read a bit further into these, I highly recommend these as starting points. And I'd like to begin with a quote from James Clear. You don't rise to the level of your goals, but you fall to the level of your systems. So we really want to have great systems in place because they are ultimately what's going to drive us to get to where we want to go. Now, I love goals and I think they're very important, but I like to think of them more like guiding stars. They're a bit like a compass and they show you which direction you want to go in, but you absolutely have to have a plan and a system of how you're going to get there. Systems also allow us to enjoy the journey. If we're only focused on the goal or the end point, you basically get fleeting moments of joy when you tick that thing off or hit that big goal, whereas a systems or process mindset allow us to enjoy the journey, the 99% as it were. Another major benefit on systems is actually we can run a lot of them on autopilot. And running things on autopilot mean they don't require a lot of willpower to implement. Willpower is, many people believe, a finite resource. There's a little bit up for debate there, but it's hard to be spending willpower all day, every day, trying to force yourself to do the things that you think are best for you. Ultimately, if we can run certain things or systems on autopilot, it makes life much easier for ourselves. Okay, let's dive in. So Fogg doesn't really believe that there's good or bad behaviors, but in fact we should be thinking that there's good or bad behavioral design instead. If you can design behavior so well, it becomes almost impossible to fail at what you set out to do. Now, habits are really great because they allow us to solve life's tricky problems with relatively small amount of energy or small amount of willpower. If we design them really well, we use willpower to decide what our habits or behaviors will be. And at later stages, they almost run on autopilot. So we're not needing to spend willpower every single time we want to engage in a new habit or new routine. It kind of just happens on autopilot if your environment is set out really well. So the acronym and graph from this slide is based on Fogg's work from Tiny Habits. So he came up with a couple of very simple and easy acronyms. So we've got BMAP and the ABCs, very easy to remember. We've also got this graph on the right hand side. So BMAP, that means behavior equals motivation plus ability plus prompt. So if you check out this graph on the y-axis, we have motivation. So as we go up the y-axis, motivation increases. On the x-axis, we have ability. As we move across, as we move towards the right, our ability increases. Then we also have prompts, the P's here. Now, if the prompt, sorry, this line is called the action line. So we have a prompt which will either occur under the action line or above the action line. When your motivation is low and your ability is low and a prompt occurs, it's going to be under the action line, and ultimately you're not going to act in your new behavior because you don't have the required amount of motivation, or your ability to perform that task is too low. Whereas when our ability is really high and our motivation is really high, when a prompt occurs, it's going to be above the action line, the activation line, and we will act, we will engage with our behavior. So what this tells us, it's absolutely vital to be considering motivation and ability when we're trying to install or delete any habits. And what we need to be really wary of is creating a new plan for ourselves when we're in a state of really high motivation. So say you've just chatted to a friend and they've implemented a new exercise regime. They're really, really buzzing about it. It's working really well for them. If you then design an exercise regime of your own from that state of really, really high motivation, people have a tendency to overdo things and set kind of unrealistic targets. And a week later, when their motivation has waned somewhat, they're much, much less likely to follow through. So we need to be really wary of what our motivation will be like in a week's time, in 2 months' time, etc. And make sure that we are setting the desired behavior to an appropriate level so we have a really, really good chance of following through on our desired behaviors or habits. So the big issue we're going to face is we're going to have low motivation. And one way to counteract that is to artificially increase our ability. So when our motivation is low, if we can make our ability high, chances are we're still going to be above the action line and we're still going to engage in the desired behavior. So how do we artificially increase ability? Say you want to start a new exercise regime. Instead of committing to 3 high intensity interval training sessions and 6 hours of cardio a week, what we want to be doing is making something really, really small and really, really easy, so it's almost impossible to not engage in that activity. So let's make our behavior 2 press-ups. Sounds ridiculous, but the premise of this topic is the small things really, really will add up, and we can also increase the volume at a later date. So ability to perform 2 press-ups is pretty low. Motivation, if it's a bit lower, we should still be in a place where it's easy for us to carry out our desired behavior. Okay, we need a prompt though. So the prompt is the thing that's going to get us to think, oh, I need to do X, I need to do Y. So one example I quite like to use is boiling the kettle. Pretty much every morning, before too long, I start boiling the kettle. So my prompt is boiling the kettle for a cup of tea or coffee. When I boil the kettle, I do 2 sun salutations. Takes me less than 2 minutes. It's really, really easy. My ability to perform that sequence is very high. No matter what my motivation's doing, I get down and do them. To give you another example, say you want to start a new meditation practice. If you've not done it before, your ability to engage in an hour-long practice is going to be very, very hard for you to do. You're probably going to burn out within a couple of days, most certainly by the end of the week for 99% of you. So how can we make our ability to perform a meditation routine higher? Well, we commit to taking 3 deep breaths, for example, or 1 minute of meditation. So sitting down and taking 3 deep breaths or 1 minute of meditation is so incredibly easy that it should be almost impossible for you to fail. So we've got our simple behavior. What's the prompt going to be? Perhaps it is putting a meditation cushion in between your bed and the door to get out, so you almost fall over the meditation cushion on your way out, the prompt is really obvious, so you can't miss it. Now, the sneaky thing with setting habits to be so incredibly small that you can't fail is you manage to overcome you overcome inertia. So it actually takes a lot of energy to start a behavior, but once you've started one, it's actually much easier to carry on. So if you can trick yourself into meditating for 1 minute or doing 2 press-ups, it becomes really, really easy just to carry on for a little bit more. So 1 minute turns into 5, may turn into 10, 2 press-ups may turn into 10, 2 sun salutations may turn into a slightly longer yoga routine. So we set ourselves a laughably small task initially, and it just becomes easy to carry on. And it sounds daft, but this stuff really, really works. It's been very well researched at this point. It is the way to go. Once you've engaged with your behavior for a number of weeks or months or days, as appropriate, you can also then start to ramp up what you're committing to. So instead of committing to 2 press-ups a day, you could actually start to commit to something a little, that's definitely going to stretch you and get your results quicker. So once it's become a routine or a habit, you can then start to ratchet up the volume, the intensity of whatever behavior it is you're doing. So that was BMAP. Another one of BJ Fogg's acronyms is the ABCs. So we'll dive into that next. A stands for anchor, B for behavior, C for celebrate. So all that the anchor is, it's basically another word for the prompt. So we want to come up with something that's going to prompt us to engage in our behavior. Actually, one of the best ways to do this is to attach our new desired behavior to something we do already. So I'm sure most of you watching this will brush your teeth twice a day. It's not something that any of us find hard to do. We just naturally do it. Another example I gave earlier is boiling the kettle. If you like having hot drinks, it's something that just occurs time and time again throughout the day. So habit stacking is where you attach your new behavior to something you already do, and your new desired behavior just rolls off from the other one. So at the end of brushing your teeth, you go straight into doing something else. It's a bit like an algorithm. If I do X, then I do Y. When it comes to anchor or prompts, we want to make them really, really obvious. So with the meditation example I gave earlier, I said you could have the cushion in between your bed and the door, so you basically fall over it in the morning. That's a nice, really, really obvious prompt that you're not going to miss. So when you're thinking about installing a new behavior, try and make it really, the prompt really, really obvious so that you don't miss it whilst going about your daily routines. Okay, next up, the B in the ABCs is behavior. We've already touched on this quite a few times already, but you want to make it something so small, so ridiculously tiny that it's almost impossible to fail. So 2 press-ups, really, really easy. 2 deep breaths, really, really easy. It's not a huge undertaking. It doesn't require lots of energy. It doesn't require lots of willpower, but you get on and do what you said you would do. And if you do this time and time again over the course of a year, you're going to make some really, really good impacts on your life. We want to make sure that we can engage in these behaviors when we have low motivation. We're designing all of these things so that on our low motivation days, it's really easy to crack on anyway, and it doesn't require lots of effort. Finally, the C in the ABCs is celebrate. So we want to congratulate ourselves or give ourselves a pat on the back. Something, make it a little bit more visceral than that, but make sure you celebrate the fact that you just engaged in something you set out to do, and be excited for yourself, be happy for yourself. So one little phrase you might want to use is just, like a little fist pump that people do in sport when they've done something well. You know, they've scored a goal, they've scored a try in rugby. Just be like, yes, yeah, that's like me. It's again, might sound a bit daft, but we want to celebrate after we engage in the activity so that we're reinforcing this positive behavior. So the ABCs are vital for installing new healthy habits, but they're also the best way to remove the ones that we don't want to engage in anymore as well. So you can apply the ABCs to habits you want to remove. So we'll just run through that quickly now. So when you're engaged in a negative behavior, there will be an anchor for that. The most common one that people think of now is smartphone use. If you have your smartphone out in front of you, you're going to see it almost constantly, and it's just going to drive something in you to pick it up and engage with it. If you want to remove a negative behavior, it's absolutely vital to figure out what the anchor was, what the prompt was, and do your absolute best to remove that anchor. So one area where this is quite an obvious example for this is to do with like food and alcohol intake. If you get home from work and you open the fridge and the beers are at eye level, and maybe there's some leftover pudding, dessert, whatever it is, ice cream at eye level, they are very, very obvious anchors, obvious prompts, and they're gonna make it harder for you to resist those behaviors. So if we're trying to cut down on our unhealthy foods or drinking, we want to make the prompts much, much less obvious, or even better yet, remove them entirely from our environment. So instead of them being at eye level and easily accessible, we put them right to the back, or we put them on top of the back, on top of the highest shelf where they're basically out of view. And the absolute best is to completely remove them from our environment. So if there's no beer in your house, it becomes much, much harder to drink beer. And when it came to installing positive habits, we tried to make the behavior as easy to engage in as possible. And on the flip side, for removing negative behaviors, we want to make the behavior really hard to engage in. So again, with smartphone use, some people use a K-safe, I think it's short for kitchen safe, and you can lock your smartphone in there and you literally can't get into it for however long you set for it. So that you set a timer on, it could be 60 minutes. If you chuck your phone in there and put the timer on, it becomes almost impossible to engage in that behavior, because you'd be having to get out a load of hardware tools. I don't know how you'd break into it, but it would involve some pretty powerful hardware to smash open this K-safe. So you've suddenly made the behavior really hard to engage in. When you've removed the beer from your environment, suddenly drinking a beer requires you walking to the shops, driving to the shops, going and getting more. So the behavior has suddenly become much, much harder to engage in. So that's the brief overview on removing destructive behaviors as well. And before we move on, it's really important to note here that you will inevitably fail. We're all we're all flawed humans at the end of the day. You're never going to stick to your new behaviors every single day. You're also going to engage in some of those negative behaviors again after you said you weren't going to. So really, really importantly, when you're creating a new habit, don't beat yourself up when you miss a day, but absolutely do not miss twice. The golden rule is never miss twice. You're inevitably going to come up short at some point, but never miss twice. If you miss 2 days in a row, then you basically don't have a habit anymore. It's habit suicide. But when you miss the odd day, no worries. Don't be too hard on yourself, but make sure you get back to it the very next day. Never miss twice. And once you've built up some momentum, you've strung together a series of habit wins in the day, you've done it for a couple of months or a couple of weeks, whatever it is. When you're starting to feel like the momentum's really building, you can then move on from this really, really tiny, seemingly insignificant behavior and start committing to something of higher intensity, higher duration, and that way you can ensure that you get the results you're after a little bit quicker. But remember, consistency is key. So take it really steady. Don't overload yourself. Don't jump to something so high that your ability becomes diminished. And on the low motivation days, your prompt is going to make you appear under the action line. We want to keep things steady, keep things consistent, and just keep chipping away slowly. So that's effective behavioral design in a nutshell. Importantly, the next stage is to think about how you're going to apply this to your life. I've given you the theory, but the theory will get you absolutely nowhere unless you implement some of these things. So what I want you to do now is to take a few moments to decide what are going to be some of the most impactful habits you could start now, maybe some of the most impactful things you could stop doing as well, and decide what habits are going to have the most impact on your life if you do them on a consistent basis. And my promise to you, if you follow this formula, if you implement these things, you will get results. There's no other way around it. If you act consistently, when you've installed intelligent habits, you will get results. I can guarantee it. So if you take another moment to think about how your life might be different if you installed a new healthy habit. So yeah, what would you like to install? Would it be something in nutrition? Will it be exercise? Will it be something to do with relationships or family? Making more time for your loved ones. What would it be, and what would that habit look like? And then you can run it through what you've just learned and figure out how to basically bulletproof your habits so that they're really easy to do. You can do them every day on a consistent basis, and those little wins compounded over 6 months, over a year, will have a really big impact on your life trajectory. So again, my promise to you, if you follow this formula, you will get results. It's inevitable. So thanks for watching through to the end. I told you a little bit at the start of the video, but my role really as a coach is helping people realize their potential and living their absolute best lives. So what I do is I help people close the gap between their current reality and their true potential. Moment to moment to moment throughout our lives, we're living at a level below what we're capable of, and working with a coach is one of the best ways to close that gap and realize your potential and start living the best life that you can lead, really. So I'd love for you to book a consultation with me. You can do that using the links below. And we can spend some time together to understand your challenges, your goals. We can dive into whatever you want, and we can figure out how you're going to get to where you want to go and how you can start living up to your potential. So please use the links below, book a consultation with me, and I'd love to chat with you more soon. Take care. Bye.